Okay, I was born in Janesville, Wisconsin. That's way down south, almost 14 miles from the Illinois border. And from there, uh, because of the Second World War, my dad, who was a railroad engineer, as was his dad, uh, he was assigned down there in Chicago to move troops during the Second World War. So we moved down in the late 30s because this was in the works, and Dad was already working on the railroad. So we lived in central Chicago, 1 block away from Garfield Park, which was beautiful. I had swings and teeter-totters and swimming pool and ice skating rink during the winter and all that kind of stuff. There at Garfield Park, it was marvelous. Yeah, so we had access to a lot of stuff. I had to walk a mile to church, but that's okay. From very young on, I wanted to be a priest. I wanted to be have people call me father. I don't know why, but it was one of those things that from 8 years on, I thought, gee, that's a great thing. And when I went to the seminary at Calvary, those 4 years were just so formative, to see the wonderful men, Gerald Walker, and all the different priests that were there. They were so inspiring. Okay, then after my mother died, she died when I was 11. She had leukemia. Then we moved back to Janesville after the war. And I lived with one of my aunts in Janesville. And I started looking for a seminary, and I got a reference to St. Lawrence, and I fell in love with it. That was it. Did all my 4 years there, high school. Well, I was invested as a Capuchin, I want to say around 1950. And after I did my studies first I went to Calvary as a student there, first year student, and finished high school. Then I went to the novitiate that would have been about 1950. And from there, had my studies, first year studies out in New York. We were still one province. Then I came back and studied at Crown Point. And then from there to Marathon, was ordained in 1958. And let's see, for a couple of years, I worked in Indiana as a professor of languages and also in parish work, weekend help-outs. It's in Gary, Indiana. And after that, let's see, it was in the 1960s, and I don't remember the date right offhand, that I was assigned to Nicaragua. And so I went to Nicaragua and worked in different parishes down there for some years. Yeah, I speak Spanish and Mosquito. You know, you say, Isa Benina Lupia Bol, Spirit, Holy Kirabasin, you know, things like that. The sign of the cross and different prayers, and be able to preach and teach to the Mosquito people. I worked in a Mosquito parish up in the Waspam area in Nicaragua for a while. I worked in a couple other places until I was called back to the States, and was asked to be pastor at St. Francis of Assisi Parish in Milwaukee. And when I got there, there was a great movement going on in the 1980s for the development of the lay ministry program. Well, we had been much involved in that in Central America, and so I started promoting the idea of having that in the Milwaukee Archdiocese. And they were looking for places to do it. They had some classes in the Archdiocesan Seminary and in other seminaries. And then they started a school for lay ministry formation. And I got involved in that for 6 or 8 years, doing a lot of lay ministry formation. Well, it was fascinating because we had all different cultures. I worked in the lagoon area for 6 years, and that entailed going up from Bluefields on a boat, on my own motorboat, and visiting 7 or 8 different parishes, mainly English-speaking, a few Mosquito, all around Big Lagoon, beautiful area of Nicaragua. I loved it. And it took me out to go down and visit one community on the ocean too, on the Caribbean. Well, obviously I knew Father Solanas, you know, but yeah, there are a lot of friars that were real inspirations, you know, both in teaching and in pastoral work. You know, Father Matt Gottschalk and all his social work and all of that great stuff. Well, the neat thing is, you know, the brotherhood. You know, you're always with brothers, and you know, we have our limitations, but we also have our gifts, and to use those, I mean, it's wonderful, and to share them. The opportunity to live out what they told me as a candidate back at Calvary, join the Capuchins and see the world.